Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Grasso, Senior Editor at Prevue, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour. I'm happy to welcome our panel. Anne Gorman, Vice President, Sales and Marketing, Streamline Events. John Kluken, Market Director of Sales and Marketing, JW Marriott Dallas Arts District. And Terry Matthews Lombardo of TML Services Group.
Hello.
Many thanks to our sponsors, Explore Asheville, Lansdowne Resort, Resorts World Las Vegas, and Tourism New Zealand. Today's session will be recorded and you will receive a link via email, so don't worry if you miss something. As with all Prevue webinars, you will receive CEUs from the Events Industry Council for your participation. Please use the Zoom chat to keep things lively and ask questions. Also, check your console for our white paper on dealing with disruption. And now I'll turn it over to our panelists to say a quick hello. And while they do, please feel free to drop a note in the chat and let us know where you're from and post any questions that you may have for the panel throughout the session. Anne, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. As Steve mentioned, I'm Anne Gorman. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Streamline Events. We are a full-service events agency located in the Bay Area. I have been in the industry for almost 25 years now, all on the agency side. So glad to be here with you all today and share that perspective.
Terry?
Yes, hello, everybody. I'm Terry from Orlando, Florida, and I'm a veteran meeting planner. I have been doing this a long time, and I represent corporate association and incentive business and have for many, many years, and happy to do so. So thanks for having me today.
And John.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. John Kluken from Dallas, Texas with Marriott International. I've had the fortune of being in the business over 30 years on the operations side as a general manager and also as an area vice president. And then about half amount of my time has been in sales and marketing across almost all of our brands, and have been in resorts, convention hotels, and suburban hotels, and have lived coast to coast. So had a great career with Marriott, and looking forward to our chat today.
Thank you. So to start things off, how has your site selection process changed? Anne, if you would like to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing I want to bring up today is, just kind of the short lead times that I think we're all experiencing. That's been a trend for a while now, and I think we can officially say not a trend anymore. It's just reality. What we were spending, sort of thing, maybe 6, 9, 12 months out, we're sourcing space 3, 4 months out now, which really impacts the way you have to approach things. And I think that's brings in even additional challenges. You're casting a wider net because you're going to have trouble finding space, and you have requesting extremely fast turnaround times from the hotels because there's such urgency now. When we first started coming back, face-to-face meetings, clients were waiting until so close in because they didn't know whether or not they were going to be able to have the meeting. And I think now that's just our reality, is that we can expect to see that continue. One of the other trends I think we're noticing a lot lately is really thorough, kind of extended site inspections. We had a client last week went to a destination to look at 3 hotels just to pick which hotel, and then planning site would happen later. That would have been an overnight trip before, to have a quick stop at each hotel, take a look, make your selection, and head home. That turned into a 5-day site inspection now, because we really feel like you need to stay and experience the hotel. What are the service levels like? What are the dining outlets like? What is the vibe like at the hotel in order to make your selection, which is really kind of impacting the way we negotiate with hotels, because we know we're going to need more comp nights now for those site inspections, and just more time and money and energy from everybody.
I'd like to add to that, Anne, all excellent points, but I now also include site inspections closer. Once the contract is signed, I go back as many times as I can possibly do it, because things change so much in the hotels now, or all the venues we're using. What you saw in your site inspection before you sign that contract can look totally different, can be open, closed, the restaurants, the bars, things like that. So I think making as many repeated site inspections, and especially the closer you get to the date of your program, makes it really important to keep an eye on that. And sometimes I go unannounced even to the hotels just so I can snoop around, so to speak, and see what other meetings are there, what their signage looks like, what their you know, their flow patterns are, and how it's working in the layout of the hotels. So
Hotel salespeople are maxed out. Is it hard to get hotels to return your calls, and how do you work around that?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I feel for them. I feel like you're getting responses from hotel salespeople at literally all hours of the day. And you know, one of the things I think we've been trying to do a little bit more lately is, you know, not send a full RFP when possible. You know, when you do have a client who's in those initial phases of like, listen, I just need to kind of get a sense of what availability is. Just send a quick, short RFP that just needs like, listen, do you have the space and what would the rate be? We can get into all the other questions and what your concessions would be and terms and conditions and all that stuff down the road. But let's keep this short when we are at that, you know, phase where you are casting kind of a wide net and looking at a lot of different destinations. I think, and we've heard really good responses from our hotel partners that they really appreciate us doing that when we can.
John, what's your perspective on that, and how do you prioritize meeting RFPs versus other streams of business? John, are you there?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Hi, what was your perspective on that, and how do you prioritize meeting RFPs versus other streams of business?
I think Ann and Terry quite summed it up quite nicely in that the dynamics have changed and the dynamics continue to change. We obviously look at, you know, when the program is looking to book or what the size of the program is, or if it's a repeat customer. So we prioritize them in that fashion and, you know, lean on our industry partners and some of our national sales folks that already have relationships with some of these independent planners and end users, and just, you know, stack up the deck to see how we're going to approach it. And I think Ann said, or Terry said, that instead of doing a full RFP, if you can do a dipstick read, if the dates and space are open, and prioritize it that way versus doing a full response, you can quickly, you know, prioritize and shift which ones are A leads, B leads, and C leads, and approach it from that standpoint.
yeah, I'd like to just add one thing. I also use a snapshot now instead of the full RFP, but I think more than ever, it's very important that we're all honest on both sides. If this is a first time meeting, I'm going to tell my salespeople, hey, the client's never done it before, but this is what we have behind us. This is how fast we're willing to make a decision. If you can work with me on those terms, then let's do it. I try and get the budget right out there from the start, the pricing, because I know that from the hotel standpoint, you've got so much business incoming right now. As John said, you have to prioritize, and it's always related to the revenue. We know that. So I think that's where the honest factor really is more important now than ever before.
And relationships and trust.
100%.
This new reality has been going on since the recovery started. Would you say that this is now the new normal?
Absolutely. I was just in a discussion not long ago about the fact that a lot of our CSMs are working remotely now from their homes and putting all of our paperwork and answering all of our questions and putting the whole resume together. And then sometimes they're not on site with our events. And if you had told me that several years ago, I'd say, no way, that's an impossibility. Your CSM is your best friend. That's the meeting planner at the hotel. They have to be there. But the new reality is that they're not always on site, as long as they're honest with you, as I said. And if you've been very detailed in getting your paperwork done ahead of time and bringing all these issues out, and you have a really good pre-con and you meet the staff that's on site working with you every day, That's one of the new realities that I think is harder to get used to, but it is the way of the world. So I think, you know, for me as a planner, nothing surprises me anymore. You just have to accept it and adapt.
So Steve,
Yeah.
I must comment on that. We're beginning to see, you know, this is still evolving for a lot of reasons, the economy, the supply, demand. We're starting to see those larger groups not book so short term. We're beginning to see those book or start to source 180 to 250 days out, which was pre-pandemic, but not all of it. And it depends on the market. I think all of you know that Texas never closed, Arizona didn't close, and Florida didn't close. So the demand dynamics are changing in those states, at least from Marriott's standpoint of what we're seeing, quicker to where we were before than some of the Northeast and West Coast and Chicago.
Anne and Terry, would you say that your clients are adjusting to this new normal, or do they still have the same expectations?
I do feel like people are starting to adjust to it. I think there is kind of a realization and an acceptance that these aren't passing trends. A lot of this isn't something we can just wait out and things will return to normal or whatever normal was for you. So I think that is leading to a lot of clients being much more aware of, especially now we've been through a cycle of everybody having those meetings, and you've been there and you really feel it. You feel what the difference in service levels are like. You feel what the new reality is when you're operating a program. And so that has helped our clients become much more accepting of some of those realities. You know, I think we have clients now who are realizing that, you know, housekeeping, for example, everybody seems to be kind of riding that and is okay with that. You know, I think service levels being different at hotels, people are starting to get used to that and plan accordingly, you know, understanding what the reality is going to be like, and then adjusting your expectations and your plans. I think particularly when it comes to sourcing, one of the things that we've seen clients really kind of be able to wrap their heads around is, you know, not casting a wide net and not sourcing the world just because you can, or you're panicked for space at the last minute. Let's be a little bit more intentional and let's focus on 1, 2, 3 destinations first and see if we can find space there. If we can't, then we can go out a little bit wider. And I think that seems to be something easy for everybody to adjust to.
Yeah, I think for me also, I'm finding I have to educate my clients on the new normal. Not all of my clients kept on meeting during the pandemic. Some of them did, some of them didn't. As Anne said, a lot of them at this point have had at least one cycle, but this year for me, I have 2 former clients. I've had them for years and years, haven't heard from them in 5 years. And all of a sudden they're calling me saying, Terry, what's it like? What, you know, what's happening? We got a program for you again. And I'm like, well, let me tell you, this is the new normal. So it's part of what we have to do as planners and educate our clients and make sure that they're not shocked at anything that they discover once they're at the hotels.
So let's talk about pricing. What new charges are you seeing that you never have before, and how do you negotiate these?
Yeah, you know, I think some of them are not necessarily new charges, but they're charges we could negotiate out of before that we can't anymore. Things like paying for meeting space. You know, that you used to always be able to, you know, not pay for meeting space as long as you were meeting your food and beverage minimum and you didn't go into attrition. You will frequently see charges for meeting space now that you can't negotiate out of.
And we miss those days, don't we?
Yes, we do miss those days. But not being able to make much of a dent in a resort fee, you know, not having as much wiggle room there as there used to be. We're now also finding there are city hotels, urban hotels that really never had a resort fee before that are now, they're calling it a destination charge, which basically is a resort fee. It's just you're not at a resort. So that was a new one for us. And we've also had a couple of hotels charge cleanliness protocol fees.
Ooh. That's a new terminology even for me, but
Which that was,
I wanted to throw, I wanted to throw parking in there now. We used to, just expect some comp parking passes for our local staff or temps coming in. Most of the hotels that I'm using anyway, they're no longer in control of their parking garages. So it's a contract for them. And therefore they very rarely will offer those comp passes the way they used to. Maybe you can put 5 per day or something in your contract, but thinking ahead about that in the contract isn't always something you know about. I just think every time I look at a hotel bill now, I say, wow, there's a charge for something I didn't know we were going to be charged for. Case in point, I quite often have to put a nursing mother's room in with my meeting space. Sure enough, I saw a charge recently for a small refrigerator that we always put in the nursing mother's room. And it was $100 a day. And I thought, that's something I hadn't planned on. And when I questioned it, the hotel explained that they had to have extra staff to move the refrigerator in, move the refrigerator out. So I said, okay, how about if I pay you on the day it's moved in? And I pay you on the day it's moved out, but you not charge me rental for that piece of equipment, otherwise you had sitting in the hotel. So, and they were fine with that. So I think, it's planner beware and just start asking questions about the things you used to take for granted that were given to you. And sometimes they're reasonable. Like I say, I understood they had labor involved with moving that refrigerator in and out. So.
John, have the pressures from revenue management and ownership increased for you? And do you have any suggestions for meeting planners, what to do, what to avoid, and so on?
I think some of these charges and extra fees have already been discussed. What can help this is when you're dealing with a hotel or a destination that you've dealt with before, or even if it's a new contract, talk about other opportunities that you may have for that location. So to maybe mitigate some of this, not pressure, but pricing sticker shock. So we really try to approach it from a pragmatic standpoint and not on a, this is a must have. So we try to balance that scorecard where, we need to make the owner money. We need to be realistic with, what the size of the meeting is and, what your frequency is and how much spend you have. So we really try and stay away from some of these outrageous charges that, gets everyone into trouble. So it's a delicate balance to price for profit, have the meeting planner be satisfied. And as important is, we want to partner with them so the end user has an experience that they want to call that meeting planner back and say, hey, we want to come back to this hotel in the future. So yes, we need to be very vigilant on how we approach the pricing and the whole dynamics from the prospecting to the closure.
A question for all. Do you have any tips for providing a top quality F&B experience despite the higher costs?
Yeah, I think this comes down to open and honest communication with the hotel. And having that good, solid partnership where you can involve them as you're concepting and creating an event. And so that you're getting the input from the hotel right then on what's feasible, what's possible, what's reasonable at the property. I think one good example I can think of where we had wished we had gotten that from the hotel was a dinner where we wanted to make these kind of custom dinner baskets. And so it was almost like a little market where you could sort of go and make your dinner basket. And then you go sit on the lawn, and we had great band playing and everything. Turns out after the fact that the hotel was really concerned about our idea and their ability to execute on it, the number of staff they needed, the impact on the kitchen. If we had just known from the hotel that they were concerned about that, we would have completely altered our plans. And so I think that was kind of a big takeaway for us, that we really need to impress upon our hotel partners to just be part of the conversation and be part of concepting an event so that what you're creating is something that the hotel can execute on, you know, in whatever their reality is in that moment, whatever their staffing levels are at, you know, whatever else is going on at the hotel that day. Open and honest communication with the hotel.
Yeah, and I try and always give them my budget for my dinner, my lunch, whatever it is I'm working on, and say, look, this is what the client's given me. What can you do for that? And the other thing is, I think, providing, again, really good education to your clients that the food guarantees, for instance, how much more important those are now. They've always been very important, but there's no overset anymore. You cannot expect the hotel can pull out, you know, 100 more meatballs just because you ran out early, or, you know, 50 more hamburgers. It's just not happening. So the hotel needs to be realistic on the menu selections, on, you know, what you can work into your budget. And I am finding, though, that for the most part, the chefs are not as willing to be creative as we used to be able to work with them, because they know their limitations on their orders back at the hotel and what they can keep on, you know, in the freezers and what they can't. So I don't know, John, how you feel about that, but I've noticed that definitely from the planner's standpoint.
Here's some perspective from the supplier side. I totally understand of creativity and this whole experience, because right now that experience is, you know, dates, rates, and space are history. So you're really, with the prices that we're charging, you're expecting an experience. You're expecting those custom touches. You're expecting the unexpected delights. So when I'm doing sites and the hotels that I have, this is when I ask, you know, tell me what your dominant buying motive is, and let's talk about what's most important to you, or your gold keys. So when we get down to the preliminary pricing and we get to the dating or this process, I say, you know, here's what I would like for you to do is, what is the customer satisfaction scores for this hotel? What is the event satisfaction scores for this hotel? So when one of you said that the kitchen or the culinary team was not, you know, comfortable, they were concerned about doing this custom menu, I can tell you that if the hotels that are at the top of their game in the whatever brand is calling it, Marriott calls it return intent scores, and the overall satisfaction scores and events. Those hotels that are in the top 10 or 15% have the staff, have the budget, have the creativity, and are delivering the experiences. So when the planner says to me, well, John, I can get this program at brand X down the street. And I said, not to be cavalier, but, you know, if you want the Lexus, we're going to give you the Lexus. If you want the Camry, we can find you a Camry somewhere. But I implore that you'll get that experience if you really dig. And one of you said earlier about kicking the tires at the hotel, doing an unannounced visit, talking to some of your colleagues of what's the real wrap of that hotel, because anybody can put on a song and dance and do smoke and mirrors, but at the end of the day is, how are they performing on the scorecard of how they're taking care of their customers? How are they taking care of their employees? Why is this hotel have such turnover and the other one down the street doesn't? So there's some factors in there that I know it takes more time, but you can figure out pretty quickly what is real and what is just today and smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm. And you hit upon another hot button, I think, for me in particular, is the staffing. That not only are we concerned about the rising pricing, but it seems to be that quite often the staff levels aren't what they used to be for banquet servers. And well, we know about housekeeping, but so many different areas. So that comes into play too, when we're looking at our overall food and beverage spend at the hotel, and trying to get creative with menus and things like that. We want to know from the kitchen how are you staffing this? How are things looking in reality when this meal that we've come to you and ask you to serve, how is it going to be presented?
And
such?
Terry, I think the real word here is transparency. So when you're
Mhm.
talking to the supplier, tell me what your staffing level is for this banquet. How many captains do you have in this room? I've seen now in some of the concessions and contracts where the planner is speccing how many servers per how many guests. So hate to get to that level, but then you're guaranteed that you're going to get that level of service because it's in the contract.
Good point. I haven't put it in my contract, but now I will, John. Thank you.
You should. I mean, if you're paying
Yeah.
the premium prices
Yeah.
and the hotels experience, well, let's talk about how you staff that event.
Yeah. But what's my recourse, I guess, if I have it in the contract and I'm on site for a banquet of 500 and I'm not seeing the staff start appearing, what's my recourse?
That's a great point,
Well,
Terry, because I think hotels are, that's a tricky thing to get hotels to
Yeah.
commit to put in the contract is what is the recourse then? We're finding that with a couple of hotels right now where, you know, we anticipate and have experienced some infrastructure issues there lately.
Mhm.
And so wanting to put some contractual language to protect our clients. And of course, if you're going to put contractual language to protect clients, there needs to be recourse in there. And that's been a struggle.
Mhm.
It's all about trust and it being open. So if you don't see those servers in that room, well, you know, then observe what that experience looked like. And at the post con, hate to say it, but then let's talk about an adjustment. You know, you
Yeah.
didn't deliver what you said you were going to deliver. So let's talk about an adjustment.
Yeah.
So, John, are your staffing levels back? And what can you share from the hotel side regarding the challenges of recruiting good people?
Well, our staffing levels are back. As a matter of fact, when you talk about the customer satisfaction scores and the employee engagement scores, so the hotels that have a solid team that take care of their employees, that are sensitive to work-life balance, and that they're being paid a competitive wage, and we're flexible with some of their needs that we weren't so much in the past, that hotel is leading the pack. So if you're not being mindful and taking care of your staff and your team, you're going to have these staffing challenges. You're going to have those issues to execute. But if the leadership team at the hotel has a commitment to the staff and the person that's cleaning the room and washing the dishes, it isn't as hard. So if you're looking at it strictly from a dollars and cents standpoint, and you're managing your business by the P&L, you're going to have a terrible end user experience. If you're really addressing your staff like they're your customer, it is not hard.
What have your experiences been with housekeeping services? Question for everybody.
Wow, that's all over the board for me.
Yeah, runs the gamut for sure.
All over the board, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a major chain or a boutique. You just have to ask the questions as a planner. I try and, you know, at check-in, I try and let the registration staff do their thing, check me in, and some are very good and very well trained about giving you the new normal, whatever it is for that hotel about housekeeping. Some don't mention it at all, and you don't find out until you're up in the room, and then you start wondering, gee, am I ever going to get clean towels here, or what's going on? So again, I think you have to ask questions in every single property, because I just find it's all over the board now.
Yeah, I mean, there's properties who are still doing daily housekeeping and turn down, and it's all lovely and it works,
Right.
you know, just fine. And then there's places that struggle to make it happen every 3 days, and you're having your room serviced at 7 o'clock at night because, you know, the housekeeping staff is, you know, down to just a bare minimum. I do think there is, particularly for some of the bigger sort of, you know, conference hotels where people are there just for a 2 or 3 day conference, lots of willingness and acceptance amongst our clients and amongst attendees, just fine. I think people are used to that now, and from a comfort standpoint and from a sustainability standpoint are completely fine not having daily housekeeping service. So I think in reality, how this shakes out, I don't really feel like it's most of the time impacting attendee experience all that much. It's just a matter of, this is just another thing as we're doing our site inspections, as we're sourcing properties. It's another question that we have to ask and start to think about when we're comparing properties and making a selection. And Terry, to your point, oftentimes when you are doing a site inspection and contracting, it might be different than when the program is actually operating. So it's a question you remember to ask again.
Exactly. And that was the only other point I was going to make about this. It goes back to room rates. Sometimes some of these contracts were negotiated before the pandemic. The rate was quoted and we all expected daily room service. Now, the new normal is that we know that's not the case. But as I said, it's kind of all over the board. We're still paying the same rates that we were, if not even more, but we're not getting that same daily housekeeping service. So you've got to question that at the time of contract, and you got to keep asking, because as you said, it can definitely change from one point of signing the contract to when you're actually on site.
Would you say that room service is becoming a thing of the past?
Oh boy.
I hope not.
Can I go with that one? Because it's a pet peeve of mine as a meeting planner. Maybe it's because I'm old, but honestly, we need our room service. There's a lot of us that we do work in our rooms at night, and it's so nice to pick up the phone and call for a bowl of soup or a salad or whatever. And it's becoming harder and harder to get that. Again, that's probably part of my age group. Because I know a lot of people don't mind the grab and go in the lobby, bring it up to the room, but it's just not the same. It's not delivered on a tray. You don't have the little flower. You don't have the real silverware. You got the plasticware that breaks. And then what do you do? All those things. So I think there's got to be a happy medium at some point in the future with hotels. I understand it's back to staffing, and it hasn't been a hot revenue point. And maybe John, you can speak further to it, but there are definitely some of us that really mourn the loss of room service.
John, what can you add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the, individual hotel. I mean, we've heard it, recently all over the board. So on your site and with your relationship with that salesperson, do the digging and, really understand what the expectation is going to be and what you want. And hopefully there can be a reason to get together somewhere in the middle. But I think the transparency piece, again, I've said several times, and so has our team on, is being really transparent about what reality is and how can we work through this? Is it reasonable? And how can we get from A to B at this price, and be very, very transparent instead of, saying this is a 5-diamond hotel and it ends up being a 3-diamond hotel. It's all about transparency and relationships and honesty and really doing your due diligence.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, John. And for any other hoteliers on the phone, please do the same to your partners and the guests and the groups coming in, because I think as from my perspective, nothing is more important than transparency in terms of what's possible at the hotel and what's going to work well and what's not going to work well. Because I think we come in with a lot of the same expectations that we've always had of properties, and there's never a discussion of whether or not those expectations can be met until there's an issue. And then you're having that conversation and you're learning things, when it's too late. When if we had the transparent conversation before, we would have adjusted our expectations. We would have adjusted our plans. We could have accommodated, whatever the reality is at the hotel. So very happy to hear you say that, John. And I'm to do the same.
As we move through this dynamic time, you all are going to remember as planners. So once 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to remember those destinations and hotels that took care of your business.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's really how I approach it with our team is the whole goal here is for Terry to want to come back with her group and for Terry to talk to her industry peers and say, listen, if you're going to Dallas, you need to use this hotel. That,
Exactly.
you got to go past today and you got to look at, you're really laying the groundwork for the future. We can't just manage today because we're all in this situation. We have to deal with it and make some investments because we want you and your loyalty to come back.
Thank you for saying that, John. I really do appreciate that because for a while we thought loyalty was out the window, and I'm seeing more of that with my reestablishing relationships, and it's very much appreciated. And back to the room service discussion, and just one quick point about transparency. I had a group not long ago. It was a small hotel. We had about 200 people in it, and we were not offering breakfast and there was no room service, but the hotel actually offered to my group, everybody in my group, my 200 rooms, to hand deliver to the room to those that wanted it, a breakfast muffin and a cup of coffee. And I thought, wow, that was just really a great way to compromise, because there also wasn't, a Starbucks close by or a Dunkin' Donuts for my group to walk to. So I really, really appreciated the hotel thinking. I hadn't even thought about the breakfast situation, that wasn't part of my conference yet. So I really appreciated that transparency and that honest conversation with the hotel to come up with a workable solution.
So you all talked about room service several times. Pre-pandemic, this room service change already started with Hilton and with Marriott. So we pre-pandemic went from china glass and silver to paper bags and plastic forks. However, the location has the latitude to buy into that concept or not. The hotels that I have, we still have traditional room service, because when you're paying $500 a night, you don't want a brown paper bag with saran wrap and a fork that breaks.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I love that. Yeah.
If I have a few questions from the audience, I'm going to open it up generally to questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat. So how far are associations booking for annuals? It was 5 to 10 years, and has that changed?
I'm not sure. We don't do much association business. Terry or John?
I have association business, but it's small. And so I can't answer that, honestly, about the time frame. John, maybe you can.
I can. So, in light of the pandemic, there were, multi-years pretty far out. So now there are hotels, many hotels that are not booking far out because of that corporate customer is going to typically spends more money and pays a higher room rate. So the hotel is holding out their inventory and telling the association customer, we're not going to contract you till X time, which may be 3 or 4 years from now. The association wants to contract it because they want to contain costs and get a contract on the books so they know exactly what they're going to pay for their members. So that's the new reality of the balance of association versus corporate. So that those association directors are having a tough time.
That's interesting.
In what ways are the very abbreviated ways of selecting sites, such as new and old, such as RFPs, impacting the quality and breadth of contracts?
I think it depends on the size of the meeting you're sourcing. I've always had this pet peeve. For the clients that have very like 1-day training seminars or 1.5 days, I have a real hard problem with being treated the same way in the sales department, having to do this 25-page contract when I'm only looking at 1 or 2 meeting rooms and just a handful of meals. I'd love to have an abbreviated contract from the hotel for those smaller meetings. I don't know if that's answering the question or not. It really, to me, it depends on the size of what you're representing. But definitely, I'm trying to be much more focused on my RFPs and just answering the questions that are pertinent to the group that I'm trying to book at the time.
It's
Yeah.
just, it's the size and the pattern as well. So if it's a midweek meeting and it's small and it's spacey, it's probably not going to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we see much more of a, depending on the tool you're using for the RFP, what kind of meeting you're sourcing, what size it is, how many different hotels and destinations you're reaching out to. You see a challenge in the kinds of responses we're getting back from the hotels, but not necessarily impacting the actual contract. I think we've heard from several of our hotel partners when we have the conversation about, what can make our RFPs stick out, how can we get better response rates from the hotels, and hotels will say, they can look when something comes through on Cvent, and if you've sourced 50 different properties, down to the bottom of the pile you go, and if they have time to respond, they will, but they can tell you're sourcing the world, and so they know their chances are smaller, so they're not going to prioritize the responding, which is logical on their end for sure, and it's helpful to have information like that.
And I like to let my clients know, in the past, they might have said, Terry, just send it to the whole city. We want to see what all the options are. And I'm like, nope, we don't play that game anymore.
Yeah.
I can narrow it down to about maybe 10 hotels that might be a good fit for you, but I can tell you right now, maybe only 3 or 4 are going to respond. And I have to be honest with them from the start. And if I can get 3 responses from sending out to 10 or calling 10 hotels, I feel like I'm fortunate.
There's a follow-up question here. Can hoteliers see how many people are planner sources on Cvent?
Yep, it sure can.
It's no secret.
Moving on to the next question. One major third party said to not write thorough RFPs, echoing what Anne just said. And why should hotels and DMOs not be held responsible to provide more information?
Can you repeat that, Steve? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it says one major third party said to not write thorough RFPs, echoing what Anne just said. And why should hotels and DMOs not be held responsible to provide more information?
I think it depends on what stage you're at. At some point, yes, you do need to dig into the details, and you are going to have to, ask all those questions that you would on a full RFP. But there are absolutely times where you could be at initial stages of your reach outs, and it's just not quite necessary yet to get into the nitty gritty with absolutely every single property that you're exploring. And so it can be appropriate when you first start looking to do just the initial search, and let's just talk about dates and rates and space as a way to narrow things down, and you can be a lot more efficient with your client's time and get them more thorough answers and responses rather than sending out a full detailed RFP to.
Yeah, and to that, I'd like to also say, I like to let them know if there's any flexibility at all in dates, because with some clients there are, and other clients, you got to have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So please, Mr. Hotel, do not come back and propose to me that we can do this on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because the client is just wasting everybody's time.
Another question. I'm seeing extra hotel service charges on top of AV charges. Is this typical now?
Specific to the AV, I wonder if that's, I mean, it is definitely. There's no doubt about that. If the person asking the question was meaning additional charges on top of the service charges on AV, the answer is yes. You can expect anything, even when you're using in-house AV.
Sure. What questions are you asking and hotels providing about issues of people bringing weapons to their facilities?
Bringing what?
Weapons to their facilities.
Oh. Maybe John can speak to that.
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Do you guys get that question?
Well, I mean, similar question, not as dangerous, but you can't legally ask someone if there's a dog, if it's a service animal, or if it's your pet. We legally cannot ask that question. We legally can't ask you, are you carrying, are you packing? So there's a real privacy issue there. Now, if someone walks in the door with an F-16, that's a different story. But as far as, a weapon in luggage, or if a room attendant sees a firearm in the room, that's a different conversation. But you can't, on the front side, interrogate a customer that's coming in your business about, are they carrying? In Texas, you can carry without a license anywhere.
Yeah, I would imagine that gets real tricky state to state, what you can
Yeah,
and can't do, and what you can and can't say and ask. Yeah.
You could really be in a really litigious situation. The planner could be, the hotel can be, and so could the end user, because it's really delicate.
What are you negotiating for contracts that protect groups, corporate and association meetings around many of the US laws that prevent duty of care considerations?
Wow, that's all over the board too. I mean, duty of care, even a year ago, is different than it is now. I mean, I have some clients seriously that don't give a second thought to what was regular last year, having an EMT on board and having everyone tested every morning and having health checks and all of that. And yet I still have some clients where that's very important and we still adhere to all those protocols. So for me as an independent planner, my answer is it's still all over the board because of the variety of clients I represent.
Yeah, and I would say, majority of our clients are in the tech space, and so not necessarily a lot of diversity amongst the types of clients that we support. But even then, I would say a lot of diversity in how they're approaching it, and so that is very, very case by case.
I mean, remember it wasn't too long ago where we had to check with the city authority, the county that our meetings were being held in, to see whether the mask mandate was being enforced or not. I mean, we all had to go through that for a time. And now at the very least, I try and advise my clients to make sure we have masks available, make sure we have tests available, make sure we have plenty of hand sanitizer, just kind of like a comfort station that everybody can go to, because everybody's at a different comfort level with travel still too. I mean, we're all in the industry, so we've been traveling, we've been powering through it all these years, but some of our attendees, it's still the first time they're getting out to a conference since they were locked down. So we have to be cognizant that there's still, that element out there to deal with.
Another question. What is the contract clause that you include in your contracts that you would consider to be out of the ordinary, but you always include and don't budge on?
One that we have been sort of changing the phrasing we've been using lately, and is, kind of the construction clause, which I think was a standard part of a lot of people's contracts, but not using the word construction anymore. It really isn't just about major construction on site. We want to know what repairs you're doing, what is out of service because it's being redone or repaired. I think
remodeling.
We've mentioned earlier that a lot of hotels, I think, have some infrastructure issues that we know are issues at these certain properties that we're trying to mitigate for clients that we're working on current hotel contracts for, and really looking at that clause and making sure that the wording protects not just major construction, but all of the various disruptions that can happen from any remodeling, any repairs, any renovations. It isn't necessarily just about the major construction anymore.
How many hoteliers and planners truly are working together to ensure sustainability is standard these days? Are hotels still providing sustainable efforts with housekeeping, such as going green with laundering, etc., giving the guest the choice to have linens changed, towels changed, and so forth?
Oh, yeah, I think absolutely yes to all that. They're really,
Mhm.
I think hotels have always done a wonderful job at, their sustainability initiatives and making sure that we're aware of what their sustainability initiatives are. Some chains better than others, but I think that has become very common at hotels to have a good, solid sustainability program in place. How our meetings can complement that and further extend that, I think, is something that we're really working with our clients on. And a lot of that is coming from our clients who are publicly saying that they have these sustainability initiatives, that they want to be, have deadlines and public statements out there that then are trickling down to their meetings and the suppliers that are supporting their meetings.
Mhm.
So
It's
wholehearted
definitely
yes.
it's definitely part of the conversation now that, again, a few years back, we were just starting to think about it, but every single program I do, it's at least part of the conversation. I like to bring it up in the pre-con as well. Where are your recycling bins? I've got one client that will not allow me to use bottled water under any circumstances. Has to be water bubbler stations. And so it's definitely something that we're working more and more into the conversations. Again, I don't work for one particular organization. If you might have a different set of standards that you would bring to the hotel. To Ann's point, some clients are very specific about that now because it's in their company culture.
Another question, attendee travel comfort level is still up in the air, and a solution is to put events in cities where a majority of the attendees reside. However, that makes our rooms to space ratio off and hotels aren't bidding. Any suggestions about what to do in these situations? It's hard to place meetings now when nobody is bidding.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. I think looking at non-hotel meeting space is a great option. Looking at the convenes, if you have one in your city, something like that. There are a lot of really wonderful venues out there that can do really creative, unique meetings that aren't ballrooms inside a hotel.
Yeah, definitely. And I think most major cities and even second and third tier cities, I'm finding there's very unique meeting space. There's conference centers, there's retreat space. I've even several times used had meetings in office buildings where they had a cluster of meeting space rooms that they rent out, and sometimes it fits the bill.
Another question. It seems that almost all hotels now have Encore as their in-house AV company, and they're good but also expensive with their fees and ask for a very high fee to bring in an outsider. What's your experience with negotiating the outsider fee away? I've tried several times to bring in an outside company, but by the time you add in the Encore mandatory fees, it's no longer cost effective.
Yeah,
I'm
and so I
going to tell
think,
you.
yeah, no, sorry, go ahead, Terry.
Oh, just right from the start, it goes back to your hotel contract. And I think what's happening now with audiovisual in the hotels, more and more planners are paying more attention to the contract negotiations up front, because things like that weren't always in our clauses before. It maybe said something very generic about, we'll give you a 10% discount on your audiovisual if you use our in-house. But it's much more rigid now, speaking specifically to the audiovisual company that's in-house. And so you can address that in your contract up front and negotiate that.
Oh, 100%. And I think this is where you really have to decide, what are your AV needs going to be? And is that something that you really, from a relationship standpoint and a comfort level standpoint, need to bring in your outside vendor? Oftentimes paying the fee is completely worth it. because
Exactly.
you know that the quality is going to be there. You know, you can bring
Yeah.
in your partner that you trust in it, and it's worth paying their fee. Sometimes it's not if your needs aren't
Yeah,
terrible. And you go with it.
exactly.
And then you really have to build a relationship with the Encore people that you're going to be working with.
Mhm. And I would also say, again, for me with smaller meetings, it's not worth the hassle for me to bring an outside company in sometimes and then have to pay an extra fee every time my outside company wants to even plug into the electric in the hotel that sometimes is controlled by someone else, and your internet needs also. So you have to look at your overall needs, like Ann said, and really weigh whether it's worth it or not. And we're not bashing the in-house audiovisual companies. It's the fees that we're all coming up against that we have to start questioning. And again, it goes back to contract. Sometimes hotels are sneaking in this, internet is free if you use our in-house audiovisual and things like that. So you really have to be very careful about when that's raised in your contracts, how that's worded.
And there's a question for John. What are Marriott's standards for room service, and does that change in different size hotels?
I think it looks like John might have dropped
I
off.
think we lost him.
Oh yeah, I hadn't noticed that. Okay, I won't ask that question. What else do I have? I'm having some issues meeting the F&B minimum, even with enhancing some of the budgets that we have. What are some ways to do this without adding food that could most likely be wasted? Thinking of perhaps a team building program where we can create some non-perishable boxed snacks or lunches and donate them.
I don't
Yes.
think most of my experience with food and beverage minimums, you can't just order extra food to donate. I'm not aware of that. I don't know if you have experience with that, Ann, but
It would completely depend on the property, what they're willing to count towards the food and beverage minimum, because it depends on if they're requiring it all to come from a certain department. If it all has to come from the banquets department, then it all has to come from the banquets department. And there are going to be rules about that. There are properties where they will let extra amenities that you deliver to rooms or, things like that count towards your food and beverage minimum. But this is another one where at the time of contracting, do your math and see where you think your food and beverage is going to net out to, because we have had that happen quite a few times lately where we'll get the initial food and beverage minimum from the hotel and we'll quickly do the math and say, this is $800,000 over what a group could spend, and we're serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner and 2 breaks, and you're this is, and they brought it down. So I think that's something to pay attention to at the time of contracting. But then, it sounds like you are probably past that, but have a conversation with the property and see what they'd be willing to do for you, because there are often ways actually, and it's been a caveat that this was probably about 15 years ago, but at a property where they let us use the food and beverage minimum towards our rooms commitment. And so we ended up just doing some additional suite upgrades and things like that. So it depends on how the property looks at revenue.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I've got one more question. With so many associations and groups trying to catch up and schedule meetings postponed during the pandemic, currently the hotels and sites seem to hold all the cards when it comes to negotiating. Do you see any signs of that improving and it becoming more of a level playing field?
I think it's going to be a seller's market for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I just think you have to keep pushing as a planner to find not only the right hotel, but the right city that's a fit for your group. If you want, the respect, and if you want the piece of business you're bringing to them, if you want to get their respect and have them take you seriously, you've got to do your due diligence ahead of time and make sure you're only bidding with locations that may have interest, that have the right sizes for you. And look at other major events going on. You certainly wouldn't want to be bidding at his city that's hosting Super Bowl or getting ready for the Olympics, things like that. You have to stay away from places like that.
And it's a wonderful time really to look at cities that you probably wouldn't have explored before, because this was, you know, a meeting that fit very well in Vegas or Orlando, or, you know, any one of the more common cities that we're all in often.
Yeah.
It's a great chance to look at some of those other options and those other cities that might not have been on your radar before. They can be wonderful alternatives.
Right, well, I think that's about all we have time for. I'd like to again thank our panel, Anne, John and Terry, and our sponsors, Explore Asheville, Lansdowne Resort, Resorts World Las Vegas, and Tourism New Zealand. Thank you also to all of our attendees. And that's about it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.